Hi, hello. Today I am doing a Tag Tuesday video. I'm filming this literally last minute, like I'm doing this over my lunch break so that I can edit it and upload it to be ready for the kind of standard 5 o'clock publish time that I've got for my videos. I'm today going to be doing, as you'll have seen in the title of the video, the rapid fire booktube tag. I've got 24 questions here on the old iPad, and I'm going to run through every single one and tell you my answers and what I think about the prompt in question. So, as this is a rapid fire book tag, let's try not to spend more than a minute on the intro, which we're about 40 seconds right now. So, ebook or physical book is the first question. Now, I actually do read both. My preference is always for the physical. So I'll often get the book from the library, or I'll buy the book from a bookstore. But the issue that I have is that I don't collect books. So one of the reasons why I'm not sitting in front of a big set of bookshelves is because I really don't buy or collect books. I pretty much exclusively get them from the library, Kindle Unlimited, or I might buy a book secondhand or even first hand, but buy a book and then donate it to the library when I'm finished reading. So my preference is physical book, but because I try and read as much as I can and try and fit it in around other stuff, like, for example, putting my son to bed or something like that, in many cases I need to use an e-reader or the Kindle app on my phone for that. And so in those cases, I will go for an ebook, but the majority of the time, and my personal preference, is to read a physical book. The reason being is that I focus and concentrate so much better on the reading that I'm doing if I have a physical book in my hands. If I'm touching an electronic device like my phone or a tablet or a Kindle, then I'm much more likely to be like, "Ooh, let me look that up. Ooh, I was just thinking about something," and I just get distracted, and I don't pay attention to the book, and I read about, like 10 pages an hour instead of like 30 an hour, which I might do with those are just random numbers, but I read much, much, much slower. So I prefer to read a physical book because it's better for my focus and concentration. Question number 2 is paperback or hardback. Now, my preference here is, because I'm not keeping these books and I'm usually getting the book from the library, reading it and returning it, or buying it and returning it, I actually prefer to read a hardback. This is because in the UK, British mass market paperbacks are much, much smaller, so much shorter and thicker, and the covers are very stiff. American mass market paperbacks are quite tall, they're very floppy and fun and easy to read. So when it comes to paperback or hardback, it depends on the type of paperback, I guess, but my preference is hardback, because usually they will stay open at a page if you leave it on a surface, which is sometimes I'll read while I'm cooking, and generally the kind of wear and tear that a hardback will put up with is better than a paperback, so I tend to prefer the paperback. Prefer the hardback. Question 3, online or in-store book shopping. I like both. I do a lot of my book shopping on Jeff Bezos's Everything shop. Though purchasing of books, again, is something that I do quite rarely. Most of the time I'm looking to borrow from the library, or I do use Kindle Unlimited for my ebooks, and I'll often be kind of scouring used bookshelves in nerd shops and science fiction shops and things like that. So I love in-person book shopping, but the prices for a book that, as I've said before, I'm probably not going to keep tend to keep me to the online and secondhand book shopping. Question 4 is trilogies or series. I have no real preference, to be honest. I really like a solid trilogy, but then oftentimes I'll read a trilogy and think like for example, The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. I think all 3 of those books are 5-star books, but the final book felt like a trilogy of books crammed into a book, and that because of all the time skipping. And while I still love that book, I would have loved to have just had those 3 books that cover, and spent more time with the characters and the stories that I was really loving. So some trilogies, yes, excellent. Some trilogies I just want more of. And then there are some books which are massive series that I feel like could probably have been better as a trilogy. So honestly, it depends on the story and who's telling it and how well they're telling it. The next question is heroes or villains? Now, this is a difficult one because honestly, I don't think that I'm interested in a villain story without a good hero or a hero story without a good villain. This is why the movie Joker with Joaquin Phoenix just doesn't work for me, because the Joker in and of himself is not an interesting character. He's interesting through his contrast and his competing with Batman. That's why the Joker is an interesting character, and that I'm not interested in Joker media that isn't the Batman, because when you see like all the classic Joker stories are Batman stories. Joker has faced all the other superheroes, but it just doesn't work for me without that counterpoint. I've just been approved to read Starter Villain by John Scalzi on NetGalley, and I'm really interested to get into that one because that's a villain perspective novel where the main character inherits kind of a supervillain empire from his uncle. And so that sounds really interesting, and I don't really know all that much more. But again, I just don't think that superhero or hero or villain narratives are interesting without a good counterpoint. Okay, a book that I want... This is the next question, by the way. A book that I want everyone to read. I think that it's my love for Ryan Cahill is pretty well known. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill, the first book in the Bound of the Broken. I genuinely don't think that there's really anyone who I know who likes fantasy who would read it and be like, ugh, this is rubbish. I think it's very universal in terms of its themes, and its storytelling is fast-paced and strong enough that everyone could enjoy it. These are supposed to be rapid-fire questions, and I'm on 6 in almost 9 minutes, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. What is... okay, question 7. Recommend an underrated book. Underrated books. Here's the problem. So when I read, almost all of my reading recommendations are taken from BookTube, and I'm only reading the stuff that is rated on BookTube. So most of the stuff that I read is not underrated, it's rated. In some cases, you might say it was overrated, but most of the time, the books I'm reading are rated. So, an underrated book. I'm looking at my shelf. Well, I say shelf, my TBR pile on the floor here. I'm going to say a book that I don't think anyone will have ever discussed on BookTube, which is No Man's Land by Greg Rucka. So this is a Batman novel. So we talked Batman a couple of minutes ago, and this is a fun coincidence. So this is a Batman novel set over the period where Gotham is separated from the US and turned into a no man's land, and basically all the legitimate people leave Gotham because they're like, we want to be American citizens and live in the US, and all the criminals, all the illegal immigrants, all the supervillains stay in Gotham. Bruce Wayne, Batman, decides to, instead of stay behind and look after the city, he goes to Washington to try and overturn this legislation that's turned Gotham into a no man's land. And so it's kind of this lawless wasteland of Gotham, and it doesn't even have Batman to protect it. And Batman's not in the first 100 pages of the novel. So it's a really, really good novel. And a lot of the story elements from it were used in The Dark Knight Rises, the Christopher Nolan film. And just in general, it's genuinely like an excellent read. I actually own 2 copies of it because I had this as a teenager, and the copy that I owned literally fell apart because I read it too many times. And so I wanted to read it again as part of my kind of booktube journey, reading some old favourites. And so I bought a new secondhand copy. So I'm really excited to get into that one. I don't know when I'm going to be able to have the time to read it, but I will, and there'll be a full proper review. But I'll tell you now, I love it. It's an excellent book. The last book that I finished. So the last book that I finished was Piranesi. So review forthcoming, will be on the channel tomorrow as you watch this, if you watch this when it's uploaded. Yeah, it'll be on the channel tomorrow at 5 p.m. So keep an eye out and you can watch my Piranesi review. The last book I bought is The Fall by Ryan Cahill. So the novella that's part of the Bound and the Broken series. I was about halfway through of Blood and Fire, and I was really enjoying it. And I thought to myself, I've been enjoying the physical aspect of reading this novel, and I like the kind of cover style and theme that Ryan's got going. So I decided to start buying his books, and I managed to get a copy of The Fall, the novella. I did also get the ebook version that Ryan will give you if you sign up for his newsletter, and I added that to my Kindle, and then I was reading between the physical and the Kindle version, which is my favourite way to read. Weirdest thing I've used as a bookmark. I don't really use weird things as bookmarks. I've used like a TV remote, AirPods box, phone, sunglasses, glasses. I think probably my most commonly used bookmark is probably my phone, because I will put the book down and my phone down and then go and quickly get something from the kitchen or whatever. And I might have my phone playing music because I like to listen to music while I read. Weird things I've used as a bookmark. Again, unfortunately, nothing particularly exciting. Sometimes the receipt for purchasing the book is the thing that I've used. Used books, yes or no? Yes. I love used books. I purchase used books quite a lot, and then I either donate them back to the charity shop that I've bought them in, or I donate them to my local library system. There's a ton. My local library system, the Somerset Libraries, has now probably like 100 fantasy novels that I have donated to them. And I never see them on the shelves outside that are like, we don't want these books, so we're selling them. So that must mean that it's a good that they like the stock that I'm donating in. Top 3 favourite genres. Okay, fantasy, number 1. Urban fantasy, number 2. Epic fantasy, number 3. No, that's kind of a joke, really. Fantasy is my number 1 genre. I would say that's like 90% of the books that I read. I really enjoy a good sci-fi novel. I am really struggling to find the right sci-fi novel for me, I have to say. I read Murderbot, didn't like it. Well, I say didn't like it. I read basically the entire series and then was like, most of these have been 2 or 3 star. Why do I keep reading them? And then and this is just for me, obviously, you might think Murderbot's a 5-star read. Absolutely go with it if you like it. The Three Body Problem by Sushin Liu, again, I gave that a 3-star and I really struggled through it. I don't know what my next sci-fi read's going to be, but I'd love some really good recommendations. Yeah, fantasy, sci-fi, maybe a third genre, because I very rarely read outside of those two genres, but maybe thrillers. I've read a few Stephen King thrillers or horrors that I've really enjoyed. And next month I'm going to be trying to read like 5 Stephen King novels for Halloween, but also just because I want to read Holly, so I want to read the novels that she is in preceding it. Borrow or buy is the next one, and borrow 90% of the time is my answer. So I will buy books. I like to buy books from indie and self-pub authors to support them, and I will buy a book if I cannot get it from the library. Sometimes in those cases I'll choose to buy an ebook because, like I've said before, I don't collect books, so I like my I like my shelves to be neat of the very small number of books that I have decided that I want to keep. So mostly I'm not buying books, I am mostly borrowing. Although I said I have donated a lot of fantasy novels to the library system, that's lifetime. I'm not buying a huge amount of books. I think last year I may have bought 10 physical books. Okay. Characters or plot. I don't think there is anyone in the world who is reading a book and is not going like, I want the characters and the plot to be good. If only one of those is good, it probably won't be a good book, or it won't be a good enough book for me to think that it's worth my time. So the only books that I can think of that I have enjoyed that are primarily character focus is Robin Hobb's Farseer trilogy. Those are extremely strong character focus, and the plot and the events of those books feel like the kind of things that would happen over those 3 books. The plot kind of feels like what would happen normally over a single book by most authors, and what you'd get as kind of like the end of the first act is like the end of the first book. So very interesting style. I love her characters, I love her writing style. So maybe I guess I have to go with characters, because I've not really read books that are all plot, no characters. It's mostly, if I've read one which is much stronger than the other, it's mostly character focus. Long or short books. This is a real big decision maker, because I love tearing through a ton of short books. When I read the Dresden Files back to back to back, and I was reading sometimes 3 in a week, that was so much fun. Just getting this whole story straight shot through, really enjoying it, able to read it in a couple of days. But I think that long books will probably always have my heart for the amount of more time they have to set up their plots, their characters. So yeah, I'm going to say long books for this one. Next one is long or short chapters. And ironically, this is going to be the opposite. So I want short chapters. I always want short chapters. Chapters that are, give me a book that has 100 chapters in a 1,000-page novel, and each of those chapters is a short, sharp scene, beginning, middle, and end scene with a, something that draws you into the next chapter. A lot of books now I'm reading and I'm looking and going like, this book has a 30-page chapter, a 40-page chapter. And I think that's okay when you're at the end of your novel and it's like the final battle. I know that Sanderson's got like a 200-page chapter in one of his books. And that's fine when I'm in it with you and it's, super fast-paced, action all the way. but I don't want a 30-page chapter outside of that kind of like ending Standalones style part of your book. Long chapters just absolutely kill my enjoyment of books. I've talked about this a little bit. In fact, I'm going to talk about this a little bit when I review Fated, which is the first Alex Verus novel by Benedict Jacker. And that review is forthcoming. I do want to do that because I've got the second book here. So I will talk about that when I get to it. But yes, long chapters killed my enjoyment of that book. And I really, really wish that we could just get lots of short chapters rather than a small number of long chapters. And that's very definitive. There's very, very few situations where I'm like, oh man, this chapter was so long, I loved it. It's always the opposite. Name the first 3 books you think of. I'm not going to think of any of the books that I have specifically talked about in today's video. First 3 books that I think of. It by Stephen King. Your mind goes blank when you do. This is a weird question anyway. So It by Stephen King. Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, and Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. There you go, 3 books random off the top of my head. Books that make you laugh or cry. Now, actually, I don't often have that kind of outsized physical reaction to books, but I will say, when I was reading Of War and Ruin recently, there were multiple times in the kind of final third of the book where you spend a lot more time with Dan, where I was laughing out loud at jokes that were made either by him or at his expense. So, Of War and Ruin genuinely made me laugh out loud multiple times. The Dresden books also did the same thing. Our World or Fictional Worlds? I would like an interesting world. I don't really care whether it's first or second world fantasy. I love second world fantasy when it's well done. I don't love second world fantasy when it is medieval England but the place names are changed. So I think that's pretty obvious. Question 20. So we're closing in on the end here. Audiobooks, yes or no? If you had to push me, I'm going to say no, because I struggle to read audiobooks. If there is anything else that I can be doing while I'm listening to an audiobook, my brain will try and do it. So my brain will try and browse my phone. My brain will start thinking about something else and completely ignoring it. The only time that I can read audiobooks is when I go running, and I train for long distance running, for like ultra marathons. So I do have a lot of running time to listen to audiobooks, although I tend to listen to non-fiction when I do that. And I can also listen to audiobooks while I'm driving. However, when I'm driving, I do still sometimes find my attention wandering, and maybe paying more attention to what's going on around me in the car than I am to the audiobook. So I only tend to listen to audiobooks like on like a long motorway drive or something, where I do still have to be paying attention, but I know where I'm going and all this sort of jazz. Do you ever judge a book by its cover? Not really. I don't tend to know what the cover looks like when I decide I want to read a book. I might see a cover and go, wow, that's a nice cover, I'm interested in reading that book. But I'm more likely to go, that's a nice cover, what are the Goodreads reviews like? What do my favourite booktubers think of it? I'm more interested in the content than the cover. And that's always been the case, really. I'm not so bothered about it. Some of my favourite books have terrible covers. Okay. Book to movie or book to TV adaptations? This honestly depends. Usually the length of the book and the time period covered. For example, I think the first Mistborn novel, The Final Empire, would be an awesome movie. I don't think that would work as a TV show. I think you'd be stretching it out too much. But the Stormlight Archive, you couldn't do as a movie. That has to be TV, really. So honestly, it depends on the book. I don't think there's any right answer for this one like there are for some of the other questions. Movie or TV show you preferred to its book? The Prestige by Christopher Priest. It is an incredible novel. I would absolutely say that is without doubt a 4 or 5 star novel. But the movie version is my favourite movie of all time. Directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale and Michael Caine, Scarlett Johansson, Piper Perabo. Incredible stacked cast. David Bowie is in it. It's one of his final movie roles. The movie is about these two competing stage magicians at the turn of the century, last century, not this century, who kind of are young and up and coming together. Then there's this tragedy that befalls them, and it sets them against each other for the rest of time. And they have this huge epic rivalry where they're both trying to outdo one another. And it's a really, really excellent book. Really, really excellent film, sorry. Like I said, it is my favourite film of all time. I think, everyone should give it a chance. It's one of Nolan's earlier films, so not everyone's seen it. It's definitely worth a watch. But the book is also excellent, but the book does a very interesting thing where it tells the story with the framing device of the modern day descendants of both of the main characters from the movie, which is completely cut from the movie. That whole storyline is cut. And it makes for an incredible, incredible ending sequence in the book, which is really, really excellent and is a better ending than the movie's ending. However, the movie is a really, really fantastic whole. Like I said, it's my favourite movie of all time, so it's going to be very hard to trump it. The book is not my favourite book of all time. However, it is an excellent book and everybody should read it. That might be another recommend an underrated book or a book you want everyone to read. So definitely check out The Prestige by Christopher Priest. It's excellent. The final question in this very long tag video is series or standalones. 99% of the time I'm more interested in a series. I like standalones for kind of non-genre fiction. So I read a couple of years ago The Good Father by Noah Hawley. That's a standalone novel. It's just, one and done. And I really enjoyed that novel. I would recommend anyone to give it a read. But I don't want Game of Thrones to be one book. I want that to have that time to percolate and to give me all those amazing breadth of characters, places. You just can't do that in a standalone with a lot of fantasy stuff. So most of the time, because I'm a fantasy reader, I'm more interested in series. However, outside of the fantasy genre, I do really enjoy a good standalone. But it's hard for me to get into that world building, those characters, that story, and then it just be done. So I tend to prefer series. And that's it. That's the last question. I didn't realise that. So thanks very much for watching along. I would love it if somebody else also wanted to tackle this tag video off the back of watching mine. If you're a newbie booktuber, just like me, comment down in the comments below and I will subscribe to your channel and we can chat in the comments back and forth. And please try doing this tag. It was quite fun to do. Most of the questions are framed as yes or no answers, want either or answers, and are not that, but they might be for you. So I know for some people, for example, hate ebooks and can't read ebooks in the same way that I really struggle with audiobooks. So I'd love to hear your answers, and maybe I will try reading the recommended books that people are recommending in these rapid fire questions. So thanks again for watching. Please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for that Piranesi review, which is coming tomorrow. And I will speak to you soon.